Hello, and welcome to Returning to Us, a podcast that gives you strategies and tips for how to hack your brain, build and strengthen relationships, and to teach people how to recognize and neutralize their emotional states. I'll discuss emotional intelligence and regulation, how food and exercise impact the body and brain, and share lessons from my own lived experiences. I'm Lauren Spiegelmeier, the founder of the Behavior Hub, which is an organization that works to reduce the stressors of raising and educating children through a brain and biology-based lens. In these episodes, I'll share stories and strategies from my own life, work, and research, answer listener questions, and wrap it up with a try-it-at-home tip. Decades worth of information in just minutes. You ready? Hey everyone, welcome to the Returning to Us podcast. Today I have a special guest who is an early childhood intervention specialist. It is Renee Pena Lopez, and she's going to talk to us about all things kids, play, behavior, all the usual stuff that we like to talk about on this podcast. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in and let Renee tell us about who she is and what she does and all of that good stuff.
Hi, Lauren. Thank you for having me. And I am always happy to talk about these things. It's just a passion of mine. So I'm Renee Pena Lopez, and I own the Magic of Littles. And I've been in early childhood. I just realized, literally, I think I was filling out this survey through Bank Street, and he asked, like, how long have you been teaching? And I was like, oh, I haven't been teaching that long. And I actually did the math. Realized it's been over 10 years. So that's been fun. I was a CA for about 6 or 7 years. I lose track because I never remember when I start things and end things sometimes, as you can tell. And a CA and where I'm based in New York City is a special education itinerary teacher. So I worked one-on-one with kids in the actual classroom and with the families and with the school and all the related providers. So that would be OTs, PTs, and basic coordinate services, as well as implement services. So I did that for a big chunk of my teaching time. I also was a co-teacher for a bit. I'm one of those few people that knew I didn't want to be like a head teacher. I tried it here and there and realized that I really didn't love it. And always loved children that were challenging in all the best possible ways. And so I found ways to find different roles that supported those ways. So so my teaching journey has been an interesting one. I'm currently next year going to work in a private school as a lower school support teacher. And I'm excited to learn for English, so I get to add play, things like that. All together. So I'm really excited to dive in. I love being in education. And I think it's one of those fields that if you're not sure what you're into, you can try all different things, right? I think oftentimes people think they have to be a head teacher, or they have to be the specific roles automatically. And I think try it, right? See if you like it. If not, then as you're in the field, you get to hear about other things. That's how I heard about see it in other words like that. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I had to laugh too, because last year I came to the realization that I have also been in the field for over a decade. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this for 10 years. And where did that time go? But then I sat and just reflected on wow, where I was at 10 years ago and how, my career started, and learned a lot in a decade.
Yeah. And I think it hits you, right? You don't realize the different dynamics. We actually moved during a pandemic, in the middle of the pandemic, and my husband was going through all my stuff, and he was like, "What is all this?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's from when I was taking courses." Do you need all this? And I'm some of it I do keep. I honestly do go back to materials, and some of it I'm no, I don't need that. But it's just the things that pile up for you and the things that stay with you. It's really interesting to see.
It is. It very much is. I know you kind of alluded to this already, and I love talking to people like you because I think we have probably a similar story as to why we maybe got into education or why we stayed in education or why we chose the pathway we did inside of education. So I'm wondering like where your passion comes from and what makes you love those challenging children.
So it's a great question. So I'm going to get a long and a short story. So the
Okay, do it.
long story is that I naturally come into this world. So I was born a preemie. My mom is born deaf, and so I kind of, in a lot of ways, didn't have a choice in a nice possible way. So ASL was my first language, and language for me personally was delayed. So later in life, I found out I was dyslexic because of those like particular elements.
Yep.
And why I struggled with things with like writing, which is why I'm excited for the OG course, right? Like I'm like, something to help me dissect. You know, we're all kind of personal when we're teaching, right? We're like, something to help me understand myself too. That's helpful. Yep. And so yeah, so that, and I've always been a mom's advocate and things like that. And so what I found out when I was younger, that my mom had this picture up for many, many years. I don't think I ever said this story, but for many, many years, and out in her bedroom. And I looked at it and I was like, Mom, why do you have this picture up? She goes, you don't remember this picture? Like, you know, the doctor took a picture when you turned 5. And I was like, big deal. Like I turned 5, whatever. And she's like, it is a big deal. Like you were born, I was born like 25 weeks. I was pound and a half. Okay. She's like, a lot of things weren't developed. Like we just, you know, we didn't know if you're going to make it. And, you know, once you turn 5, they all realized you were going to be okay. And I was like, oh. Like I started like, I'm getting tears in my eyes, right? I was like, oh, Mom. And I often think about that picture. Don't ask me where that picture ended up in the midst of all this moving. But like I still remember pictures from like this dorky 80s like striped shirt that like anyway, I digress. But you know, it's so embraced in my mind that I realized the earlier I got services and the earlier help that I received, I may not have gotten everything I needed, right? Because you don't know what you don't know. And back then they didn't know to implement so much early intervention, because to them they were like, you're progressing as normal, right? Like you're walking typically. I mean, I have a short Achilles tendons, but like, no, they were like, you should outgrow that. You know, like it's just a different philosophy than nowadays. And so I often think back to that like conversation I had with my mom. She's like, it was a big deal. And I was like, okay. Like, if that was a big deal for me, then how is this a big deal for like other families? Yep. And you know, in the early childhood field, and that just stuck with me. So yeah, so that's one of my reasons why I'm so passionate about this, because I am a product of all of it. And I think if you can serve a part of the field that really is akin to you, you're more likely to like stay in it and, you know, deep dive and serve others. So yeah.
I think it's similar of like going through a system. It's probably a similar time that you were, and having my own childhood issues and carrying them into school. And you at a young age, you don't know how to deal with that. You don't know how to ask for help. You don't even know that you need help. And feeling like now as an adult and looking back, like a system that didn't even recognize I needed support, and kind of feeling the frustration of like, oh man, if someone had seen that, if someone had known, if someone had, you know, just all these questions, and okay, well, I'm going to take what I didn't experience. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to do my best job to make sure that as few kids as possible experience the same thing I experienced, and they feel heard, and they feel seen, they feel supported, and no one like overlooks a child or treats a child the way I often see challenging kids being treated in the school setting. And I have compassion for that. Like people just don't know, but we need to help them to learn. So
yeah,
like similar place.
And you're right, like the systems, they have improved, right? Like they're not definitely. Like
absolutely
1,000% you know, perfect. Yeah. But they have improved, right? Like there are now systems in place. I when I had my daughter, I remember these checklists, and when we got to the autism checklist, I was like, like, did they have this when I was a kid? You know, I asked my mom, she's like, I don't remember, just like, blah, blah, blah years ago. I'm not gonna date myself, which I did say 80s, but so you probably figured it out. But she was like, like, no, we didn't have stuff like that. So like, they've come to a certain point. And I think also some systems, other systems, right? Like I am Black and Puerto Rican, and I'm proud of who I am. But I think, those factors people didn't realize, like stuff like that come into play. Access to education, access to knowledge, right? Like access to just, different disparities, like not having those assumptions. And I think nowadays we're really thinking hard, long about what that means. You're not just gonna look at a Black boy and be like, you're autistic, right? Like just because he's a challenge, it might just be like he might have some family trauma happening, right? Especially the time is recording after COVID. But maybe he lost, a couple of family members, and that's why he's having those challenges, and not because he actually might have a disability of sort. And so we're starting to learn to unpack those things in a way that, when we were younger and so forth, that weren't really seen in that way as a general whole. So it's as I always say, it's progress, it's slow progress, but it's a start.
I do agree. We are making improvements for sure. But I know in your work, I believe you're working directly with educators, but also probably with parents. So like something I always think about is like, from everyone's perspective, like what do you see people struggling with? So maybe let's start with teachers. What do you see other teachers, especially in the last year and a half with a very unusual circumstance of the pandemic? What are you seeing? One, what are you seeing them struggle with? Two, what advice do you have?
Oh my goodness, that's a loaded question.
I know.
Wow. So I'm thinking about like, what am I seeing teachers struggle with, right? Like I'm seeing teachers struggle with time management, finding time to just not only just get things done, right? But like feeling like the workload they have is a balance with the connections that they're making with kids in the classroom.
I agree.
And the activities and the workflow and all that. I feel like this year we don't know what next school year will feel like. So I think we all still have the anxiety of like
not known.
But like no one knows, even though most of the country, United States, have going back full time, right? Like nobody knows, especially because younger ones under the age of 12 are not vaccinated. So there's still a lot of question marks of, could schools still close? Are they going to be testing? And I think just a balance of balancing remote learning and in-person learning has been those struggles. And I actually this whole school year just taught remote, and I'm in awe of anyone that did hybrid, anyone that taught all remote, anyone that taught all person, because they all have their pros and cons to it. And I think across the board, we all struggle with time management. Like everyone was just trying to squeeze in all the stuff they were trying to squeeze in. And I think the advice you asked me before we hopped on, like what advice would I give? And like, you can't do all the things. And I think setting like realistic goals for yourself. Like, if you look at your week and you say like, okay, I want the kids, and it doesn't have to be a theme, but it can be like, I want them to connect over this one particular game. And if that's your goal for the week, like I say like, celebrate that, right? Like if you get to the end of the week, like all the kids are able to like take part in this like breakout session goal game and like this brain break game, and you felt like everyone was feeling relaxed and not feeling so stressed for that moment, and that is your one goal for out of all the things you got done, then great. Like I think oftentimes teachers, we are perfectionists, right? Like I raise my hand, I say I'm a recovering perfectionist all the time. And I think if we just put it out there and say, like, if I make realistic goals for myself in the classroom, then I don't feel like I failed, right? And then the children don't feed off of me going, oh man, like, let's hurry up, let's move it, let's do this, let's get this done, right? Like they feed off that energy. And if you start coming back and circling back, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to slow down this lesson. I'm going to revisit some of the things that they're not getting. And it is okay that next week we have to get to the rest of my plan, right? Yeah. Like, so it's okay to make those like moving targets for yourself.
Yeah, I think that relates to a lot of what we talked about. I taught a course this week for Penn about trauma, but a lot of like neurodevelopmental things in there too. It's a lot about the brain. And we're just talking about that, education is already very stressful. Then you add the pandemic and the unknown. And then, we talked a lot about safety first, like biologically, we need to feel safe, and not just physical safety, but psychological safety. And because that really still isn't in place, and some safety comes with routine and the knowing, and we don't know. So there's still some level of unsafe there. But when that becomes a constant state for you, for many of us in education, it has this unsafe state, your brain's focus is more in the emotional brains. Like you're living in this emotional brain. And the problem is like time management and some of these things, even motivation, comes from your thinking brain, comes from the front of your brain. And when you're living in your emotional brain, you can't also necessarily be living in your thinking brain. So, we're stuck here. We got to get out of here to get into here, to be able to manage time better, to be able to find the motivation to do. I mean, I don't know, like so many times this year, I'm like, wow, I have this to-do list of these tiny little tasks. I know won't take any time. They're gonna be really easy, but for whatever reason, I am avoiding these tasks. And I know that's because I have to check in. I'm like, okay, I'm stuck in my emotional brain. I got to get back into my thinking brain, because my thinking brain will find the motivation to do these tasks. But I'm using all this energy to kind of control and manage and deal with my emotional brain. I don't have the energy or space left to do these simple things.
And that's why I always say, like, rest. Like I have this Think Up app, and like you can record these affirmations. And one of the affirmations, let me just pull up the affirmations. I think this completely relates to what we're talking about. But it has to do with rest, and like, oh, you're worthy of rest, right? Like, and that really struck me because, it's summer and we all want to get all the things done. I am guilty of it. I'm, launching a program for like early child teachers. I'm doing it for England. Renovations happening in my home. But I'm also really conscious of just like, okay, like after this certain time, even for 2 or 3 hours, I'm gonna rest, right? Like it's okay to have that. Yes. And I think when you're thinking about the emotional brain, I think we need to address that first, right? That's why we often in early child classrooms say like relationships come first, right? Like you cannot get to the academics, you cannot get to any of that stuff. If a child is, just having a meltdown on the floor, right? Like there's no way you're gonna say, okay, let's do ABCs. Like, better off, let's do it. And you're like, oh, I miss mommy. And you're like, whoa, like whatever, you miss your mommy, but I have to teach you the ABCs. It's like, you do
bypass whatever you're dealing with. Come on, just
like, you think that's gonna work? Like we know that, right? Like we know that won't work. And I just think apply the stuff that with the kids, with yourself too, right? Like, do you know that you are having a hard day and you're allowed to have hard days?
And say that. Tell the kids that. I'm having a hard day. That's okay. That tells them they can have a hard day.
I do too. I'm like, you know what? Guess what? I'm human. I'm a hot mess today. I'm like, what's a hot mess? And they're like, I like that word. And I'm like, well, I'm having a hard day. I'm like, what's hard about it? And I say, I call it a hot mess because that's my feel inside. I feel like part of my body's over here and part of my brain's over there. And it like messes like a cook, when you're baking and cooking, like that mix. And they're like, oh, I like that. They're like, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it doesn't sound awesome all the time, but I think kids get the picture, right? Like when you say like, I feel messy, I feel, I feel out of sorts.
Yeah.
But yeah, so if you're and you're allowing them to express their emotions, and then they feel seen and heard.
Mhm.
And then you're coming back to like those connections, and then they'll remember, wait, I had a hard day today. Like, you have hard days, like, how do you deal with it? And share with them, like,
Yep.
be blunt, like, some days I, just walk away from whatever the project is, right? Let's say you were trying to deal with your computer and it was giving you a hard time, and then you realize, wait a minute, I need to take a step back. My computer's overloading, I'm overloading, we'll
Yep.
come back to this,
Yep.
right? A child the other day, my little one, talking about frustration tolerance, she loves Legos. She loves them. She loves the idea of like, you can build them and you can create all these things, but that pictures that she has in her mind isn't necessarily what she's building. And so that disconnect is really frustrating her, to the point where she was like, she's safely, I like to say safely because I notice she often does it with myself and not my significant other.
Yeah.
And I think it's because I'm her safe, I'm her safe haven, where she's just like, I can release all this to you.
Yep. Yeah.
Then I will feel better, which, I often tell parents that like after school, after times they're like, oh, my kid is melting down after school, da, 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 da. And I'm like, yeah, no, you're the safe haven. Like, they
Yep.
held it all together while they were in
Yes.
school.
Yes.
They held it all together. The minute they came home, they're like, whew, I can let it go.
Yep.
Right. So I think oftentimes when you're thinking, oh, the kid has it together, yet the parents like complaining about things, it might just check in with them and say, like, what does home look like for you after school? Like, what does that transition look like to you? Like, is it just, and that's what we may have to say, like, maybe we have to ease up on homework, right? Like, maybe we have to allow a different pocket of time of slowness. But going back to my child's frustration, so she was releasing all that to me, and I said, I can see you having a hard time. Is this a moment that we need to come back to this? And she goes, I don't want to come back to it. I really, really love it. And I said, but I'm not sure how to help you right now, because you're frustrated about something that's in your brain that you can't express to me right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure, because I'm not in there,
Yeah.
of how to help you with that. How about we just find one thing that can move the needle? And I said, what are you really trying to do? She was trying to build like a car.
Yeah.
And the wheels were two different sizes. And so then it kept falling apart, because
Yep.
obviously when they're two different sizes, nothing wants to stick in the middle.
Yep.
And I said to her, okay, well, so what I noticed is that the wheels are two different sizes. How about we just tackle that one thing? The one thing is just the wheels. She's like, but does this keep falling? I said, that's the problem. But you notice that the wheels are different. So you're trying to attack two problems at the same time. She goes, yeah, because I want to get it done. And I was like, I get it, but we have all afternoon to play with these Legos. Right. So she was feeling like, I have to get this done because it's in my brain. And she didn't want to lose what was in her mind.
Yep.
Because she was afraid of being like, I will forget, or like maybe something else will happen, or maybe like, a friend would knock on the door and have a play date. She just didn't want to get interrupted. Right. So
Yeah.
sometimes kids need that time span. And so I had to just remind her that she had plenty of time, one, and two, that we can tackle this one at a time. So what happened was I then took we have a lot of Legos. It's massive, we got to organize it. But, I showed her how I was dumping them, how I was looking through them. And I started pulling wheels out and said, you can go through the wheels and see what the best wheels are to fit for your car. And once that started to take place, she started to realize, okay, I can get this done. It feels like something I can accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
And then we came back to the middle of the problem, which was like the middle that kept falling, because once she attached the wheels, she realized, oh, wait. And then all of a sudden it clicked for her. She was like, oh, wait, and then I can do this. And like, it just literally became like a whole car. But she got stuck at that, at the beginning of that function where she, I can't think of the word in executive functioning, which my brain just like flushed out.
Mm-hmm.
But it's basically the idea of like starting a task, right? That's right, task starting. I love it. And so she couldn't figure out how to unravel the two-part problem, because to her, it was one whole problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And so sometimes kids can't see the multiple steps, right?
Yeah.
Like you might see on an IEP goal, multi-step issues, right? You might
Yeah.
see like, oh, they can follow multi-steps. And you're like, oh, great, like that's easy. Like it just, but some children don't naturally have that. Like I first didn't go wash my hands, but to go wash my hands is all the different steps to go wash my hands. You may have to open a door, you may have to wait for someone,
Yep.
you might have to like turn the faucet, like get some soap on there, count, sing a song to
Yep.
do your hand washing soap, put it under water, turn off the faucet. And some kids honestly just wash their hands, right?
Yep.
Leave the water running and run out the door. They don't turn it off. They don't
Yep.
dry the hands, right?
Yep.
And you're like,
Yep.
oh, like that's fine. And you're like, no, you gotta close the cycle, right? Like you gotta
Yep.
get it done.
Yep.
And so that's what frustration tolerance also does. So yeah. So as you can see, I can talk about it forever.
Yeah. Sure. We have lots of good knowledge. You're sharing lots of good stories, and through way of sharing stories, you're also sharing strategies to address those stories. I think you've just brought to light a problem not only for kids, but the same problem that educators and parents are all dealing with. Like we want to reach this end goal, and this end goal is way out here. And we're overlooking like the first or second step that we need to take to get to the end goal. We're just focused on what's there. And again, to go back to that, like our brains are in that emotional brain and we're really stressed out, and stress overrides, learning and planning and organizing. So we get fixated because we have a hard time coming back to the present and being mindful, because our emotional brain is taking away our capacity to think logically. So yeah, I think what you gave examples. I mean, one great way for adults, parent or educator, is to rest, and rest in ways that are not like, I know sometimes we think like social media and watching a TV show are rest. And I know they feel good, but they feel good because they're hitting these chemical circuits in our brain that make us feel good. But what we don't realize is that like the stimulation, the color, the noise, all that is actually taking away more of our mental capacity. So can you find rest for yourself, for your kids, educators, whether that be walks, exercise, social, sleeping, a good meal, like all of these things are forms of rest. So everyone needs to find forms of rest, because we are just grinding and burning so fast these days. And that's parents, that's kids, that's administrators, that's everyone, maybe everyone in the world. Just we're so overloaded. Yeah, that's a good point. And that makes sense why frustration tolerance is we're able to tolerate this.
And I actually see it more in the summertime for us than I see it for her in the school year. And I think because the school year is such structure, right? Like you get up, you get dressed, you go to school, you do your school routine, they have their routine, and you come home, then you know what to expect. You come home, you play, you have dinner, you wrap up, right? But like summer, it's like, oh, today you're gonna do this, and tomorrow you're gonna do that, and now we're gonna be home. It's like, oh, we're going on vacation, So, oftentimes when people are like, oh, how do you transition from back to school? I'm like, you just get back into your routine. You literally just get back into, like, even if it's not a school time. I think that's oftentimes why people use camp as a way to transition back to school. But even like the week before, to start, even the middle of the day is something that's fun. Still keep your evening routine, right? Like we didn't do it like 2 days ago, but we realized like, oh, we gotta back to our evening routine, because it's obviously just
the brain loves pattern and it loves routine, and if you can get that, it's going to function more optimally. It's going to be more happy. It's how we regulate, which makes me think too, kind of, we talked about a couple different strategies here and things to do for kids, for adults. If you're comfortable sharing, like what are some things that you do to manage your own, like maybe overwhelm, or maybe anxiety, or maybe whatever strong or big feelings you're feeling, because we're all human and we all have some level of feeling somewhere. What are you doing that's working for you to respond?
Oh my goodness. So I realized during the pandemic, I've always had anxiety, and I think I never knew what it was. I just knew it was like something, right? And after I had my first child, I had postpartum anxiety. And then in my research of like postpartum anxiety, I'm like this all the time. Like it's not like a one time. It got heightened, like it got worse for me. But I realized I was like, wait a minute. And so when this March shutdown happened, it triggered another episode. And I realized I was like, I need to find out what people are talking about when they say high function anxiety. And I did. I was like, I need to figure out what this means. Like, have I always had it? Like, why do I always have it? And then I realized I did. Like, I kind of self-diagnosed myself, but I kept journals from when I was a kid. Um, I don't know how I found journaling. I think, or I do know. So my aunt gave me like this little diary. It was a Hello Kitty diary. Actually, I kept it, and I found it, and she was like, "What's this?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, it's my first journal." And she was like, "I don't understand why." I was 7, like I was just writing, or no, I was 8. Like I was still like a young writer, and I would just write like about my day or complain or whatever have you. But I'm an only child. I always have to let people know. So you're like, why are you always journaling? And um, because my mother, because of our relationship together, and because I was the only child and was often like by myself and isolated, I didn't feel comfortable like sharing my feelings oftentimes, unless it was my aunt or like a one really good friend. So I think that's why my aunt got me this journal. She was like, just write, just complain to the book. And I kind of like, I've always been off and on in my journal practice, but I went back to it during the beginning of the pandemic. I was like, oh, that feels good.
Yeah.
Right. And I think during high school, I used to take Fridays off. And most people, some kids like go out on Fridays and it feels good to them and they like party and they come back. And I was always like, I'm tired. Like, I'm tired. I don't want to do anything. So, something like that. I wash my hair, or like I do some type of self-care. And I used to just take my journal, take magazines, and just like sit there and read. I still do. I read magazines backwards. So I take I take a good old magazine, just read it backwards, and sit there and like write in a magazine and like do this whole thing and then tear it out and put it in my journal. But and I cry or like get mad or whatever, and then like reflect on my week, and then I feel good. Like, and then I feel great. But I think for me, alone time, and for me that alone time makes sense.
Yep.
And then another thing I like to do is just walk and listen to like podcasts.
Yep.
Or music, and just keep walking. I danced for many years, so I know most people exercise, but dance for me was like my normal everyday. I did it every day anyway, so
dancing is super healing
as a routine.
Yeah.
But I did need to learn to stop moving. that was something I had to learn.
And it sounds like walking or going slower. I think what I keep teaching people, or try to teach people, what I keep trying to reiterate is like, when the body is in brain, body, whatever, is in an overwhelmed state, when we're anxious, when we're stressed, when we're feeling like we have too much to do, you need to do the opposite. And I know that at that time you feel like what you need to do is just keep going faster and try and get it all done and try and get it figured out.
Yeah.
Your body is screaming and giving you all these signs of like, slow down, do something that's the opposite. It's yin and yang. The whole universe, nature, everything works in yin and yang. You got, think of like prey and predators, like everything, birth and death. So, something like journaling, or something like going for a walk, something like washing your hair, like all of those things are the opposites of going fast. They're slowing down, they're being present. And for our non-journalers out there, for those of you that don't know where to start and want to start, I mean, there are plenty of places. For me, I like to just do a brain dump. So like I'll just pull out a journal and just that morning and like, okay, what's hanging in my head that I don't want in there anymore? I just write it down. And sometimes it makes no sense. Sometimes it's in like sketches, sometimes it's writing bullet points, whatever. It's just a dump of my brain. Other things like you've got Pinterest and Google where you can just search prompts. Like I searched for a friend, inner child prompts. There are probably hundreds of them.
I have in the collective that I offer. So I made like a wellness journal for them at the end, and you can actually get it in my free Facebook group, the Magical Littles Club. If you just DM me, either on Instagram or like Facebook.
We'll link that in show notes.
Yeah. And so don't let me forget. So yeah, so basically it's like a coloring book, right? Like some of my educators were like, I'm really into coloring. And I was like, okay, I can make you some coloring pages and have some prompts for you.
Yep.
And I remember some of the feedback I got was like, I thought at first it was a little dorky because they're like, the kids color, but they actually said they took it out while the kids were coloring and like sat next to them and colored. And for one child, it became like such a meditative state, but I'm like sit next to each other and like color. Then they actually started like talking about more of their day and like how they didn't like wearing a mask and, all those like feelings that they were holding in. And that was how they were connecting side by side. So like you may think, oh wait, is this really worth it? Like, is it, just try it. You just never know. I would also then add to that and say like decluttering, like cleaning some space. Just tackle one area. It doesn't even have to be like a whole room. It literally can just we got into like buy nothing groups. Have you ever heard of these?
No.
So it's called Buy Nothing Project. And so there's different chapters based on where you live.
Okay.
So where you live, it narrows in even more. So let's say you lived in Brooklyn, right?
Yep.
And then you have all the sets of Brooklyn, you have Williamsburg, you have Bud Spies, right? And then it gets even narrower if it's like Park Slope and Park Slope North, Park Slope South, right? And basically people post things that they do not need, right? Like, because everyone has something in a house that they're like, I really don't need this, but I'm going to keep it here because you don't know what to do. And especially nowadays, you're like, a lot of donations are not being taken by the Salvation Army and so on and so forth. So, you post it on this group and people say like, I'm interested, and you coordinate a time to like go pick it up. So that's how we've been kind of like taking our anxiety, renovating over here. We've been like,
that's amazing. So many awesome things available to us now. Yeah, the internet and the availability of
if you go Buy Nothing group, Buy Nothing Project, and then it'll tell you chapters.
Love that.
In your city, and then it'll go into further, but it's typically like a Facebook group. Okay. And in the group that'll tell you the rules and all that stuff. But that's one way to declutter. If you're feeling like, if you're like me, where you like to give to others, and feel like you're making a difference in some way, then that's one way to do it, about feeling like you're feeling stuck.
Yep. Which is a great segue into my next thought and question is the gift of giving. I always ask, and I usually do book recommendations, but it could be a book or a podcast. I mean, just for anyone, parent or educator, do you have any a good book recommendation or a podcast?
So I can go on forever.
We're going to limit you to top 2.
I can do that. Okay.
And
so I'm looking at my, so I'm going to set them in 2 categories.
Okay. Do it.
I'm going to cheat. So for kids, we like listening to Julia's Library.
Okay.
And she's just amazing. Like, it's Julie Andrews. Like, how can you really? She invites the authors and they read their books, and she covers all different types of books. So social emotional learning, just like every time I hear a book, I'm like, I gotta write that down. I gotta get it from the library. So that's one of our favorites. And then Highlights Hangout. So we get Highlights magazine in our in our home. We get High Five, actually, that's bilingual, English and Spanish. And she just actually loves it because it mixes like, do you know Wow Science? Like, they also produce the same thing. So it mixes all the like cool fun facts with the silly jokes. Jokes. And so it mixes like all that with like storytelling, which is something we're working on. And so it kind of blends in all the things that I'm working on with her, but then also all the things that she likes. So it's a nice hybrid for us. And then for educators, beyond my podcast, I actually tell educators to listen to Unruffled by Janet Lansbury.
Unruffled is a good one.
Which you probably knew of anyway, but I just always say like she's a good place to start. And then I have another podcast called Learn Smarter podcast. It's two educational therapists. And if you don't know what educational therapy is, then essentially it's holistic. And I'm actually an AET, like an associate education therapy. I'm like lower level associate, but because you become board associate, but it's basically holistic learning of the whole child with academics. And they talk about all the things for early, which I found interesting because they're not talking just about early childhood, but they're talking about like, some of it might not apply, like email management, but they talk about like YouTube learning, right? Like how to apply that into your
expansive,
like
yeah,
more expansive, yeah. How to explain educational theory to your child, right? Like, and if you listen to it, you might get some ahas. But I often like listening to it because they talk testing, which and you know, in special education, we're always doing assessments and things like that, right? Like understanding kids who are rigid, like just things that like they're covering this scope because they have a different definition of practice.
Yep.
That it makes you rethink about how your teaching practices.
Awesome. It sounds very aligned to the work that we do, like teaching based on the brain, helping kids retain information in the brain. So I love that
work. So I'm a brain dork.
we will make sure that all of this is a lot of good little snippets here, that all of it lands in the show notes. If we're talking too fast or you miss it, it'll be in the show notes. We'll get it in there. All right, we're going to wrap up with most profound, maybe greatest aha of, and it can be either with child rearing, with being a mother, or within the educational field, or maybe there's one that connects to both. But like, what's something that you learned or someone told you or something that impacted you? They're like, whoa, that one was life altering.
So I think for me, I remember she just said to me, because I was asking questions about becoming a mother at the time, and said to her, like, how do you do it? I was just kind of like, how do you do it all? You're teaching all, you teach full time.
It's a lot.
And you have your child. I'm just in awe. And I'm still in awe of her. If she ever listens to this podcast, and probably knows who I am once I get the tip, who she is, excuse me, once I get the tip. But she said to me, like, she takes like 5, a quality chunk of time. And usually it's when she comes through the door. So, and puts her stuff down.
Uh-huh.
And I think she got this from someone else that's incredible, amazing. I can't remember. But like, she puts her stuff down and she just plays with her kid. Like whatever they're doing, just like, so go in there. Right? No, nowadays it's like, go wash your hands, take the mask off. But like, do those things, right? But still like take that time. And I never realized it, how powerful it was, until one day I actually saw my significant other come in, and he did the same thing. Like I guess it didn't hit me until I saw him do it, and I was like, because he doesn't get as much time as I did with her. I had a different flexible schedule, and so I spent like longer chunks of time. So I kind of took that for granted. But when it flipped, when our schedules flipped one summer, and I was working a lot, and he was home, and I was like, oh. And then it like flipped again that same summer. I don't know, it just hit me where I was like, your presence is what's needed, like nothing else, right? Like she wasn't asking for, maybe it was just to read a book or play Play-Doh or what have you, but she wasn't asking for, $1 million. She wasn't asking for like, more toys. I mean, she's in that phase now to ask for more toys because she knows she can. I'm setting different boundaries for that. But I think just your presence, right? I think no matter what age group we teach, right? It could be the little ones or adults. I think your presence is what makes all the difference. So yeah.
I think that is a beautiful tip. It's so simple, but something we easily overlook. And I'm going to add that, and we're going to have 2 try at home tips. We'll down there because I like both of those. Renee, where, if people want to connect with you, or they want to follow your work, or they want to learn more about you, where is the best place for them to find you?
Great question. So I am on Instagram, the Magical Littles, straightforward right there. I have a Facebook group that is a free Facebook group that you are welcome to come in. I sometimes share resources. I like to go live. I like to have teachers connect with each other. If you are a homeschooler, that does include you. If you're a childcare provider and a nanny, that does include you. We take people from, typically I say preschool, so I say 2s to 7s if you want to jump on there. And then that is the Magical Littles Club at Facebook, like Facebook group. Just type it in, it comes in, and pop some questions, you answer them, and let you in there. And then a final thing is I have an awesome download called Can I Play 2? It's a toolkit about working with children with challenging behaviors. And you can get that on the website. It's the first thing that like pops up. And you just put your name, your email, and you get a cool, like awesome PDF that will give you some more tips and tools that you can use.
And I will get that link from you. Maybe if there's like a direct link that you can, just click in the show notes and or the link to the website, whatever is easiest for you, for them to get access to that. Awesome. Anything we missed? I know we could probably talk all day. We could probably talk for hours. We could probably do another episode at some point because there's plenty more to talk about. Anything that you were like dying to share that I didn't ask you about?
I mean, I would just, I think I say this often in like my newsletters to people, but I say like, you're not alone, right? Like, you're listening to podcasts like this because you want to be better, and like you are enough, right? Like you are not, your students are not behind, you're not failing them. Like I know this year has felt like, everyone talks about usually the summer slide, but now it's like the pandemic slide. And I don't know, I feel like that message just needs to be repeated again, that you are doing the best you can, and like it is okay that times have been rough, we'll get back into that mode, but also take the lessons from this past year and next year, because it will be also lots of question marks, and apply them to the rest of your, the rest of your work. And just know you got this, right? And I've offered this before. I have a collective, impactful intervention collective that I open a couple of times a year, and you're welcome to join. And we talk about interventions and guided play, and I have a couple other fun things that are now like sparking my brain after these conversations. And I have master classes, like guests come in and do workshops and stuff. So we have lots of resources, myself alone, and just feel like you're not alone.
I'm gonna challenge everyone to stop, pause this podcast right now, go get a sticky note or something, physically write down I am enough, and then post that somewhere where you're going to see it, whether it be your computer, your bathroom mirror, your car, whatever it is. The more you see that message, the more you physically write that message, the more your brain believes it. And I would think after this last year, I think many of us are really feeling not enough, not doing enough. So write that down. And to wrap up the show, we are going to do our try it at home tip, which you have 2 of today. So your first try it at home tip is you don't have to do all the things, and really to break it down and start with the micro steps. Like what's the tiniest little action you can take? For me, with the way I do this, I write down 3 things I want to accomplish every morning. And if I get those 3 things done by the end of the day, even if I want to send out a piece of mail, I cheer myself on and I applaud myself. So break it down, don't do all the things. Second try it at home tip is maybe what we call like a check and connect. So we are always in such a rush to get all the things done, to do all the things. So making time, whether it be in the classroom when kids come in, to check in with them, connect, just play, be mindful, be present. Or if it's your kids at home, when you come home from work, pause, take 5 minutes, play with them. So check and connect, don't do all the things. Just kind of try to flesh out the most important, or the first step of all the things. And that is it for this episode of Returning to Us podcast. Remember, try it home tips. Don't do all the things. Check and connect with your kiddos. And if you want me to answer any questions on a future episode, email me at podcast@thebehaviorhub.com, or you can even text me 717-693-7744. And what we know about the brain is it's best when you lock in all these little snippets here and there right away. So an easy way to do this, go ahead and leave a review or a comment with your biggest takeaway, so that will lock it in. And don't forget to subscribe to future episodes to learn more ways to hack your brain and your biology. Until next episode, I'm Lauren Spiegelmeier. Thanks for joining us, Renee, and thanks for sharing your genius.